So more than ever, IT infrastructure is expected to deliver better, faster and more consistent performance. On top of that, IT needs to show a lot of flexibility and needs to adapt to changes very quickly. And I guess that's valid for physical, virtual and cloud infrastructures. So Chris, how do you think data centers should be prepared or structured to meet those requirements?
Okay, well you kind of nudged upon it on the physical, virtual and cloud. So in the good old days of last year and the year before, critical applications were running on a physical environment. And things were pretty easy to manage at that point. You had a physical server, physical switch, physical storage. Everything had tags on it. You knew where everything was. And in terms of capacity within those devices, you provisioned just the kind of correct amount that was needed, allowing a bit of flexibility for fluctuation in requirements. Then virtualization came along, which introduced more productivity, but actually it's an additional layer of complexity for the people that are managing that infrastructure. Where we are now, you've got private cloud coming along, you've also got mobile, you've got a lot of new elements that are impacting that. So what's tending to happen is the data center infrastructure people are over-provisioning all the hardware in order to ensure that everything performs okay, which is a very expensive way of doing things and actually takes you right back to the start of the physical environment wasn't over-provisioned, so now things are being more and more over-provisioned. And the only way you can get around that is to be able to see exactly what's going on throughout the entire infrastructure. And that's where infrastructure performance management comes in. It's a category that kind of goes across multiple areas. So you've got application performance management of one piece, you've got network performance management, you've got storage resource management, you've got all of these areas. But actually, the applications run on the infrastructure.
Right.
And so if you talk to an application person, half the time they'll be talking about the infrastructure that it's running on. Yet within the data center, and specifically within the SAN, you really don't know what's happening within that environment. The APM tools will allow you to see from the server out to the user, but they don't show you backwards what's going on in the data center. So that's what we're here for, is to make that kind of transparent and to show you at kind of line speed what's really going on across the entire infrastructure rather than just elements of it.
How can the IPM in reality support an enterprise? I mean, you were just explaining that it's a monitoring tool, that it's an analysis tool, but how does it really help?
Okay, so what it's doing is it's showing you the performance of the application end to end throughout the SAN infrastructure. So what you really need to do, if you're responsible for that, is to be able to deliver an SLA of application performance back to the business. Sometimes, organizations with elements of this forget that that's what they're here for. Their job, whether they're a storage admin or a network person, whatever, is to deliver a well-performing application back to the business. So up until now, that's not been possible to do because any of the tools that come with your servers or your switches or whatever are looking at that one element. Maybe they're going a little bit further out, but they're certainly not giving you the entire infrastructure. And so in order to guarantee the performance, you don't want to look at, the CPU rates or whatever. That's like trying to judge how fast your car's going by looking at the fuel gauge. It's just not a smart way of looking at it. So what we offer is a way to see end-to-end the entire infrastructure, regardless of vendor, in real time. By that I mean a kind of line speed, and we do that across completely heterogeneous environments. So it doesn't matter whether you've got IBM, EMC, HDS, Cisco, Brocade. It doesn't matter to us. We can show you the entire environment, and therefore that enables you to deliver that performance SLA back to the business, as opposed to an availability SLA or any other element.
When you talk about heterogeneous environments, so that sounds you're talking about large enterprises only. So I'd assume this would be a product not particularly for the small and medium businesses, but really for the large enterprise. And what kind of price point are we talking about?
Okay, it really is aimed. Well, let's qualify this. It's actually organisations that have critical applications that are running their business. And so if you're PayPal or Lloyds Bank or Unilever or those caliber of companies, then you have this. In fact, 33 of the Fortune top 100 companies have virtual instruments in their environment monitoring it. So yes, it is large enterprise, but it's also criticality of that. So we have some hospitals, for example, in the US, that it's the criticality of the patients there. So the infrastructure there is keeping the patients alive. So they need to make sure that it works all the time. But typically, if you look at an SAP environment that's running supply chain or something like that, that's an ideal place to use this. That will then guarantee the service levels and the performance of the applications on those very complex and very intensive systems.
So coming back to the price point again, what kind of investment would a large enterprise typically have to make?
I'd like to say there was a typical installation. There isn't. We price the solution on the ports monitored, and so the more ports you monitor, the more it costs. So whether that's switch ports you're looking at, or virtual server ports, or physical ports, that just seems to be a logical way of pricing the solution. What we typically see is we will start in an organization on a single application, and we do what we call a proof of value, which is like a proof of concept, but actually we will go in and we'll look at that application, we'll deliver back to the infrastructure people and the business how that's performing, how it can be improved, what the utilization levels are of all the elements within it. So we'll deliver that back, and at that point they can decide that's it, or whether they want to continue or not take it on, or so on. So it's really looking at the return on investment that can be made from this by optimizing the system. The other way is if somebody's got a major problem or latency issues. Quite frequently our partners, particularly HDS and EMC, will actually take us into an account where something is going wrong and they need to look at the entire infrastructure, because latency problems tend not to be one smoking gun. There is this thing that's gone bang and that's it. They tend to be lots of small things that are compounding together to cause an issue.
You just mentioned return on investment. Do you do return on investment calculations for your customers? Give them examples.
We do, but again, we'll do it customer by customer, because we actually did some work on an ROI calculator and last year, and nobody trusts an ROI calculator that's being created by somebody else. So we don't tend to use that, but we do look at, particularly you can look at say switch ports, we typically see them utilized at about 5%. You can see, like, by being able to tier the storage, optimizing systems, moving things, not everything needs to be on tier 1. Of course, if you talk to the business, they'll say, okay, this needs to be on tier 1. They'll all say that. But the reality is you can actually look at the actual throughput and the actual growth rates. We also record the results. So over time, you can actually see, this application is actually growing at 10% or whatever. So we deal with reality rather than that kind of, it should be around whatever. So that helps us develop the ROI and deliver that ROI model back to them.
So what?
Do we have one or two examples? What are the benefits for a customer?
The benefit depends on, again, customer by customer. I'll give you an example of, it was recently at a presentation by Swedbank, so the biggest bank in Scandinavia. They were looking at, they made an acquisition of another bank in Estonia, and that had a much bigger, or much more modern and productive environment. So they decided to migrate their entire data center environment into Estonia. So 500 kilometers across the Baltic Sea, but also move from mainframe to open systems environment, and also move to multiple data centers. So the proximity was no longer an issue. And in that case, they actually found that 2/3 of their switch ports were not being utilized at all. Never mind a bit, but not at all. And they'd had a policy which was, whenever an application rolls out, then you roll out new switches and that infrastructure with it. So they have now gone from memory, I think it's 2,700 square meters down to 250 square meters.
Oh, that's massive.
It's massive. The cost saving just in capital was massive, but it's capex and opex. You can look at the troubleshooting piece of it, but actually the optimization piece can make a big difference.
So it looks like you've got a really well-working product. You're obviously the market leader in this particular area. So where are you going? What's the next step?
The company is almost doubling in size year on year. The market is there for us. The infrastructure performance management market is a new area, and it's kind of growing out. We've just done some research which is showing that in the kind of high 70% of people are looking at that infrastructure performance management as something that's going to be critical to them over the next year or so. So we know that space is there. In terms of our own offering, so at the moment we monitor from the virtual machine, so the operating system level, right down to the logical partitions, the LUNs within the storage, and everything in between. We're seeing more organizations talking about FCOE, they're talking about NAS, and so on. And so our roadmap in terms of product is going to go into those directions to ensure that we can deliver more and more information on the application as it's affecting the end users, and allow organizations to set that service level agreement back to the business that they feel comfortable in, and alert them to any issues before they affect any of the end users. users.
So basically increasing bandwidth to cover as many environments as possible, or systems as possible.
I think as a company we came out of the fibre channel hardware background. We were spun out of a company called Finisar, and we've grown kind of monitoring capabilities, and you'll just see a continuation of that as the technologies come along, the new platforms come along. We'll be monitoring more and more of those.
So after all, you say we have a basic product, we expand that, but the market is there, and you just have the kind of beginning, or it's ramping up?
It's ramping up. It's absolutely ramping up at the moment. So yeah, we are spending a lot of time and effort on our development R&D. In fact, we've just put about 30%, an additional 30% of developers into Europe who are working on those new products. So we're actively spending. We're putting additional sales teams across Europe, and we've got a partner program which is expanding. In fact, one thing we're announcing here at the show is one of our partners here in Germany has just become what we call VICA certified, which is a Virtual Instruments Certified Associate, which means that they can install, implement and wrap services around Virtual Instruments products on that. So up until quite recently, if you bought Virtual Instruments, you had it installed, and it was a Virtual Instruments sales and services model. Now we're training up and certifying resellers to go and deliver that to a much wider audience.
It seems you have a pretty bright future, very interesting future ahead of you. Thank you very much for your insights about infrastructure, performance management, and I hope all the best for the show here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and if you like what you heard, please subscribe here or comment there. Thank you.
Done.
Würdest du nur was sagen?
Nein, du bist derjenige, der hier den Abschied machen darf. Right, so that was just for you.